Good morning and welcome to another edition of BizTalk Weekly. I'm your host, Greg Johnson. Joining us today is Brian Johnson. No relation that we know of.
Correct. Yeah.
Brian, thanks for being a guest today. Very appreciative of you taking the time. Can you just give us a little introduction to yourself and your business?
Yeah. And thanks, Greg. Well, we will have to check into whether or not we're related, but there is a lot of us. And I don't know if this is weird or not, but I married a Johnson. My wife and I are high school sweethearts. She was a Johnson pre me, and we had lockers and classes together and all that kind of stuff. So we're everywhere. We're kind of a virus.
Well,
Um,
we're up here in Minnesota where the name Johnson is it's pretty common. So
Pretty common. Yep. Yep. Us and Andersons, etc.
yeah.
But yeah, thanks for having me on your program. I appreciate the opportunity. And my name is Brian Johnson, and my company is 7 Minute Security. We're down in the South Twin Cities, Shakopee area, and we're a cybersecurity consultancy. And really, most of our work is focused on helping organizations and people not get hacked as much as possible. So we do a lot of ethical hacking, or penetration testing is also what it's called, um, where we try to ethically break into people's networks, their computers, sometimes their people. Right? We're trying to call you and talk you out of your password or out of your financial information, but all in the name of teaching, showing companies how we do this, teaching them how the bad people are doing this, so that they can harden up their defenses and ideally not fall for these kind of things and not let sensitive data out into the wild.
Right.
Um, so we do a lot of hacking, do a lot of assessments, do a lot of training, and then we also have a companion podcast called 7 Minute Security. The name is a bit of a misnomer because the episodes aren't 7 minutes anymore; they're much longer. But that actually started back in 2014. So even before I started the company, I was doing the podcast and just sort of regurgitating what I'm learning about security on any given week in hopes that it helps other people be more secure.
And just to clarify, Brian, when you're trying to hack into somebody's system, they've given you the okay to go ahead and try and do that, correct?
Yeah, kind of the joke I say with my friends is like I feel like I have the best job in the world because I get to act like a bad guy. I get to do what they do, get to all the sensitive information, crack people's passwords, figure out what their passwords are. But everything is, yes, above board. It's all signed. And then I don't go to jail afterwards. And then I get a paycheck for it too. I mean,
Yeah.
I hate to say it. I think it's about the best job ever. I feel very, very blessed to have it.
Tell us a little bit about how the business got started. What inspired you to go this route?
Yeah, well, so I was doing the podcast. I had done that for a number of years, and I was working at my last full-time gig that I had before starting the business wing of 7 Minute Security. And really, what started it is I took out one of my mentors for lunch, and admittedly I was just complaining to him the whole lunch hour about, like, here I am at this company. I'm one of the kind of lone people on the security team. We just had a very small security team, and I said, we're kind of doing everything. Like, we are working our own Rolodex to go out and like contact people or companies that we've worked with years ago. We're trying to find security opportunities. We're more or less selling that to them, or we're bringing the contacts into our sales guys, and then we're doing all the engineering. We're doing all the reporting. We're delivering the reports. We're pretty much doing everything but invoicing those customers, and it's sort of bothering me because it's that very common situation of it feels like the business or the salespeople are making all the money, but we're doing all the work, right? Which I know is just, that's kind of how things work. But I think my eyes were very wide open to it because I felt like we were going above and beyond just like doing engineering. So anyway, my mentor just patiently listened to all that, and he's like, all right, well, let me understand this right. So you kind of feel like you're handling it soup to nuts, right? You're maybe the sales guys are finding opportunities for you, or you're bringing them in. You're engineering, doing the report writing, the follow up, the this, the that, the training afterwards. You're doing everything but sending an invoice to them. So he said, "So why are you doing all of this for somebody else then?" And that was like a dagger to the chest. I was just like, wait a minute, I didn't come here to get challenged. I came here to whine, and you're supposed to pat me on the head and go, "Oh, poor Brian, he's just working so hard, isn't he? Just a little guy. He's just working his tail off." But honestly, Greg, I tell you, that was like it was a gut punch, and I left that lunch. By the time I hit the parking lot, I was excited and frustrated and just fearful at the same time where I was like, I have to go do this. Like I have to go try having my own company because what he said is exactly right. Like I think I've been doing all the pieces. So I'm gonna go try to make the 7 Minute Security podcast into 7 Minute Security, the business. And so
Because you were
um
doing the podcast at that time, right?
yeah, I've been doing
Just as an employee of the company you were working for. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just to briefly visit that, that was another sort of blessing in disguise is that when I started the 7 Minute Security podcast, I wanted to start it at the company I had been working for even, back in 2014. And they were kind of like, I just don't think there's really a need for that. I don't think that really has much juice to it. But if you wanted to go ahead and do it on your own, um, that would be fine. And, I ended up just doing it on my own. And I didn't really realize until I announced on the podcast, like, hey, everybody, I would love your support. I'm going to go try to turn this into a real thing. I'm going to offer hacking services, training, this and that, this and that. And boom, out of the gate, I get notes on LinkedIn and email and DMs going, "Hey, I've been listening to you forever. I love all the information that you're sharing. Can you please give us a call? We're a law firm, we're a bank, we're a whatever. We'd love to talk to you about some sort of project." And just, boom, out of the gate, I got some deals. And that was sort of the start. That was sort of the origin story of the business side of 7 Minute Security.
Did you leave your employer with kind of their blessing, or was there a bit of a falling out given how you just described that situation? Or
No, you know what? The timing of everything actually worked out really nicely. Where the company I was working for, as I was thinking about jumping ship, and doing my own thing,
yeah,
I was getting ready to give my resignation, and they ended up then having all of a sudden a big all hands on deck meeting because they had been acquired. They sold to another company, and it was leaving. It really was going to leave our security department in a bit of a uneasy situation. We didn't know if we were going to
sure,
be, fired or maybe, absorbed or, who knows. So there was just a lot of transition. A lot of people heard the news of getting bought and they're like, I'm going to go elsewhere. Right. So
yeah.
it was just a time of a lot of entrances and exits. And so really there was no hard feelings. I mean, they were kind of like, oh, that's too bad, but God bless you. And off I went.
I love that story you told about the lunch with your mentor because I think so many potential business owners have that idea, but they really need some kind of impetus, some kind of push, something to sort of get them to jump in.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
fact that you had somebody who really spoke really directly to you, I think that's really a valuable resource to have in our lives.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, and like I said, it's something that once it hit, I mean, it was so honest, and I really appreciate that. And I don't think if
Right?
he would have said it that way, I think if he just would have kind of coddled me, I'd
Yeah.
be I'd be with you today, probably just going like, "Oh, I've always wanted to start my own thing." And I talk and after talking about, I then talked about that process really extensively on the podcast, the whole, pulling the parachute and leaving the safety net behind and starting your own thing.
Yeah.
And I hear from so many people like me who I'm trying to encourage, I'm trying to give that nudge. I think by talking about my experience starting my own thing on the podcast, I always tell people my hope is that it just nudges you one direction or the other. I said, maybe
Right.
some of you need to hear my experiences and hear me say things like, well, lucky I have a spouse that has benefits because benefits are very expensive to pay for, and I don't know if I'd be able to afford it when I was
Right.
just getting started, right? Or,
Yeah.
hey, when you're with another company, you get typically unlimited PTO, and then when you're on your own, you just get unlimited TO. The P part is missing, right? And some people reached out and said, your podcast helped me go, you know what? I thought I wanted to do my own company, but I kind of like the comforts of guaranteed salary and nice benefits and a workspace and all that. But then other people are like, hey, you help me just go, let me just go for it. I'm
Yeah.
gonna I'm gonna, yeah, jump out with no safety net and see what happens.
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned that, Brian, because that is the case, is that business ownership is not for everybody. In fact, I would say it's probably for very few people, right?
Yeah.
Because of of what you just described. And it might be circumstances, it might be, our own situation. It might just be our how we think and how we act and the risk that's involved, right? I
Oh,
mean, it's just not for everyone. And it's just as important to encourage people to become business owners as it is to know that it may not be right for you. So, going in with kind of both eyes open is really that's part of why I'm doing this podcast, is because I want entrepreneurs or individuals who are thinking about it to really consider it, to really understand what they're getting into.
certainly. And I think a lot of people looking to make the switch look at it how I did for a lot of years, where it's like, oh, wouldn't it be so awesome to have your own company? And then all you're doing is the fun hacking stuff, just it's a 24/7 hack fest. And, that's what I really love to do, is the hacking part. But I've given a presentation to several different high school groups about this very thing, to kind of, I show a little pie chart, and I go, here, me as the solopreneur, here's where my time is spent every week, right? So like a huge slice of it is pre-sales calls, right? Getting on a call and doing a song and dance about how they ought to use us because, we're the greatest thing since sliced bread. And, and let me roll you through my PowerPoint, right? Let me show you why I'm different than the other security consultancy down the street. And then it's like, invoicing, project management, documentation, writing reports, right? And then there's this little sliver at the very bottom that is, the hacking fun stuff. And it's actually, a much smaller slice of my week than I would like. The bigger slice goes to the guys who, the great people who work with me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not quite the rose. I think I had rose-colored glasses on getting into it a little bit. Like, I'll just get to do my favorite thing all the time, and nobody tells me what to do. But there is that part of it too. I mean, I do really love, just a tangent on that topic a little bit. I do love having phone calls, people who go, hey, I think I need X, Y, and Z. And they'll tell me what they need. And I can very confidently say, and I'm the decision maker to go, that's not us. That's not my wheelhouse. That's not our specialty.
Yeah.
We'd love to connect you with one of our partners, but that's not us. Whereas in past jobs, it's kind of like, and again, I'm not trying to dog on sales folks, but sometimes they're hungry for that sale. So all of a sudden they'll come on my desk and say, hey, Brian, we just sold a project of doing this, crazy security thing that little do they know it's not at all in any of our wheelhouses. Our team doesn't know how to do that at all. And they're kind of like, well, the ink's already on the paper. So I hope this weekend you guys can read up on it and then hit it hard Monday and figure it out. I think I still have like post, traumatic stress from some of those things where I suddenly had to become an expert overnight on something
Yeah.
I'd never touched in my life. And
Yeah.
that is one thing as a solopreneur. I love being able to say no in a nice way with a smile on my face, right? Just to go, we're not the expert for this, but we'll connect you with people who can knock this out of the park, So
Yeah.
like you said, there's a lot to consider. Great point. It's absolutely not for everybody. And when you said it that way, it's actually for very few people. It's like, yeah, I strongly agree with that. But I'm glad you're doing things like this. I think the more we talk about it, the more we shine a light on what it's actually like to have
Right.
and run a business. I think again, it's good to push people in whatever direction is appropriate for them, either towards it or like, whoa, I'm glad I didn't leave my day job because
Right.
this
Right.
is ulcer inducing.
What And I liked what you said there about the fact that, as a business owner, you have to worry about the whole business, right? 360 degrees. And I run into a lot of business owners who kind of reach that point where they're like, I did this because I had a passion for whatever it was that the business is doing, but I spend a lot of my time not doing that. Right? I have to do payroll. I have to do human resources. I have to be the finance person. I have to, like you said, I
Yeah.
have to set up the calls. I have to do the marketing. I have to do
Yeah.
the
Oh,
after. I have to do the follow up. Right? In your case,
yeah.
mine too. Right? We've got to do it all.
Yep.
But you run into business owners who have a small team or maybe a big team, and they still find themselves doing a lot of things that they don't necessarily like doing, and they're not necessarily all that good at it, but it falls on their on their lap. Um, Another thing you said I thought that was interesting as well is when you were talking about that whole alignment with what we do and what our customer needs. And I think that's so important for a business owner to recognize that you can't be all things to everybody, and really focusing on what you're good at not only gives you, I think, comfort in knowing you're doing what you're good at, but it's also in the best interest of the client. Because if you're trying to perform functions for them that you're not good at, or it's not in your wheelhouse, it's just going to end up badly in most cases, versus referring them to somebody who's really it really aligns well with what they want and what the other company might do.
Yeah, and it can be, I've found it can be just a little bit uncertain waters where when I started 7 Minute, I was like, here's our core competencies. I spent a lot of time going, I want to do my favorite things. I want to do the things that I
Yeah.
feel like I'm really proficient at, and kind of that's it. And I wanted to build a wall around that. And then, early in our days, we were getting so many requests for, hey, can you come in and help us write security policies? And I had thought, oh my gosh, that's the most dry, boring, paint drying, watching kind of stuff. No way, no way, no way. But we got so many requests for it, right? I just thought, well, this is something that'll kind of grease the wheels, get the business going. And I managed to find a contract resource who just that gets their blood pumping. They get up every day and love to write policies. And it's like, okay, super, right? So it kind of like it, got us some initial deals, and now it is still something we offer, but it's nothing that I touch because I'd rather do literally anything than write, security policies. So it is, I think, a bit of a dance almost between like this is what we're going to do and nothing else, but still staying tuned into what are people asking for, right? And if it's a way to kind of grease the wheels like it was for us, where yeah, we write some policies and they go, hey, we really like these guys, right? Then it opens up more opportunities and gets us projects that are in the wheelhouse that get my blood flowing. Um, so it's yeah. Well, but I think to your point, whatever it is, that I think is a strong recommendation is to don't, especially if you're starting out at a solopreneur, don't take something that's way outside your knowledge or skill set. Just thinking, well, that'll kind of put a project on the board, give us that first dollar that we're going to make that we're going to put in a little frame, right? Because it'll cost you reputationally, and
Right.
that could be damaging for a long time to come.
Right.
That short-term gain could very much be a long-term loss.
I do like though how you indicated that there was a need that you recognized clients had, and yet even though you weren't maybe the ideal person to do it, you had enough vision to recognize that, hey, I know people in this space who, like you just said, they get up and this is what they want to do. And I can be the conduit to make sure that the client gets what they need,
Yep.
but they're also getting it from the right resource, right? And now all of a
Yeah.
sudden that has the potential now to open up, other doors. And also what I like about that is, sometimes in a service business, there's sort of this, impression clients have of, well, I'm making this commitment kind of forever to this provider. And sometimes having sort of this, yeah, more of a transactional relationship to start off, like I just need a policy written, or, in my case, sometimes I help clients with a planning process, and
Yeah.
it's very finite, right? But we get a chance
Right.
to work together
Yeah.
and know
Right.
each other.
Yep.
And sometimes we say, you know what, that was good, but we're not meant to work long term. And other
Sure.
times it's like, wow, this was really a good first step for us to develop a relationship. Tell me more about what you do and how you might be able to help us. And I can
Yeah.
hear that, in your description a bit.
Yeah, I feel like super strongly about we always want to be or consider ourselves connector people or glue people, right?
Yeah,
So you, Greg, you give me a call and you say, "Hey, I really want this, 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 this," and I go, "None of that is our wheelhouse. Let us connect you to this group over here." I think people remember that, right? You get a chance to get in front of them, and maybe you do an abridged version of your PowerPoint, and you just go, "There's nothing really that I offer that you need right now." And so I give you off to one of my partners. But I feel like it makes a lasting impression where they go, "Oh, it's nice. They spent all that time with us. They didn't just say, no, we don't offer this buy. They cared enough to try to get us the right fit." And then we've had people come back in the loop later when they're like, "Hey, we want that ethical hacking test, and they remember us, right? So
yeah,
so they give a call to us. And when you say, yeah, about that whole I mean, I understand. I'm the same way about not wanting to get into long-term contracts or any forever relationships with on a business front because you just never know when things are going to change.
yeah,
But one of the things we've done, kind of like taking that to the extreme, is if we have a client that, let's just say we do a hacking test with them, and we've been with them 4, 5, 6 years or something, right? So we've every year we get into their network, right, and we're looking for problems. We've told some of them like, listen, we love you guys and we love the business, of course, but we've been in this environment so long, I don't think we can see the forest through the trees. In other words, there might be big systemic problems here that we're not seeing because our eyes aren't fresh on this anymore. And so we'll say, we would recommend maybe next year, right? We take a break from each other, not by any ill will, but just so that
yeah,
you get fresh eyes. We get a year to rest our eyes, right, and kind of forget what we know about your network because we tend to go in sort of with the mindset of I kind of know where the problems are. I bet I know where some of the bodies are buried, if you will. So
yeah,
I'm going to go look there. But let's get a fresh set of eyes on there just to find, if there's some easy, low hanging hacker fruit thing that a bad guy could come in and take over your whole network. Well, we want somebody else to find that, really go through your network with a fine tooth comb and then, come back to us. And I tell some of my colleagues that, and they're like, that kind of call is against like every sales or relationship book that any coach would tell you, right? Like don't ever be like, hey, we need to see other people for a year. Don't
right,
do that. But I tell you, 100% so far anyway, the customers have said, hey, you know what, I appreciate that level of honesty. And
yeah,
then they've gone away for a year, and then they come right back because they appreciate that we're just being super transparent in saying that, I just don't think we're going to be able to look at this with crystal clear eyes because we're a bit numb to year 5, 6 of seeing kind of the same computers and the same
right,
config. But it's again, I think you get there. I think one of the reasons that's appreciated is because it is rare and because it does go against what I would say I see out in the IT security world where salespeople are very aggressive and they want to sell you, every security service and blinky box and, software under the sun.
sure,
Whereas we sell more like we would like to be sold to, which is not to be a mosquito and stay at it, but to build a relationship and care about people and take care of people and sell them the right thing, not everything.
Well, Brian, two things really stand out when you say that is one is I think running your business by your values is really critical. right?
Yeah.
And it allows you and your business to align, right? I mean, if you really felt that, and yet you're going out and trying to sell more services to somebody who doesn't need them, I suspect you'd have trouble sleeping at night. Um,
Right. Yeah.
and second is, it really is all about doing the right thing for the client. And if the right thing for the client really is, taking a break from us or like moving on
Yeah.
because maybe we can't service them anymore for whatever reason,
Yeah.
that really is the right thing to do for the client. And that's how I think businesses can be successful in the long term. Does it
Yeah.
hurt to let go of a client? Absolutely, it hurts. But if it's best for them in the long run, I think one, they're going to recognize that you're doing the right thing for them. And I suspect when they're having conversations with people, your business name is going to come up because of them.
And that's what I'd hope, right? Yeah, you're right. Even if for some reason they went away long term, I'd rather have them, yeah, at a lunch someday they're talking to their colleagues and going, "Oh,
Yeah,
let me tell you about this experience I had."
yeah,
Um, yeah, you're right. And I think, it really helped to start the podcast so many years ago, never ever with the intent of it being, part of a business.
right,
I'm so thankful that it started that way because I think today a lot of IT and security companies, they've been doing IT or security for a long time. And now they go, oh, it's so trendy and hot to have a podcast. Let's do that and have all of our own people on it. And we're touting how great we are and how great our services are. That's fine. But
Mhm.
I love that, like, I started the podcast was focused on, like you were saying, being more reflective of values and being like 100% focused on, I'm just barfing up stuff that I'm learning, right, in hopes that it helps you. And at the very end, now of course I mentioned, our training services and our security
Yeah,
services, but it's still, that core message is still what runs the podcast. And I've just found time and time again, you give away expertise, you give away information, and it comes back to you, and it
right.
comes back to, I think maybe I shared this with you during our first call, is that what I get now is calls that come in from the podcast, and it's like a already warmed up lead. It's somebody who goes, "Oh, I've been listening to you for years. You guys sound like you're not condescending. You know what you're talking about. You're nice guys. Um, we have this and this need, and we're kind of just looking to know, if there's a fit and what the price is, and then off we go." So I skipped the whole, 30-minute PowerPoint, and let me tell you why, we're so great, right? We just go right to talking about potentially doing business together. Like
Yeah,
they feel like they already know us, and I think they feel good about it because we've given away a ton of information for free. And this is something that once I started the business, I was part of some of these different business chamber groups, and a lot
yeah,
of those folks, when they started consulting with us, they said, "Hey, you got to change the tone of the podcast a little bit here. You're kind of giving away all the information for free. You're telling people how to do these hacking tests. You're telling them what to look for, how to fix it, how to proactively this and that." And it really did stress me out for a while. They said you got to kind of keep some of that to the chest and say, "Hey, do a hacking test with us, and then we'll tell you how to fix things." But I just, we kind of ended up not listening to that at all and just remaining the course of, like, let's just give it away. And my same mentor who really challenged me to start the business, he had a nice counter perspective that framed things up nicely for me, where he said, yeah, you can go on YouTube and you can watch some mechanic tell you how to completely, gut and repair your car. But are
right.
you going to get out there in the driveway and do it, or are you going to hire the expert to come in and, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? And do it for you. And I said, I think that's it, right? There's one
yeah,
thing between being able to have access to all the information and hiring expertise to come in who is worth it, and it's money well spent, and they're going to do a fantastic
yeah.
job.
Yeah, well, part of that is, like you said, you're kind of establishing yourself as kind of a leader in the industry by
Yeah.
doing that. But the other thing is, nobody wants to sit through an infomercial, right? I mean, it's just not a place where people want to spend their time is being sold to on a podcast. They're coming on there because they've
Yeah.
got a concern about something, right? And they want to learn more about it. And they want to understand like how, okay, is this individual or somebody in this space somebody who can help me with the problem I think I have? And then you even mentioned
Yeah.
it a few minutes ago. Sometimes the problem they have isn't necessarily something you can fix, but now they're more educated. You can have a better dialogue with them now because of what they've learned through your podcast. And they may find, yeah, Brian is the right fit for us, and Brian agrees, or nope, we really need something different. We're in a little different lane than what Brian offers. But it's again, I think it just everybody wins in that situation at some point. Maybe you don't win right away with a new client,
Yeah.
but at some point that kind of comes back and somehow sort of supports your business either through a referral or more people watching the podcast.
Yeah. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I feel like everybody wins. And, to be honest with you, there's a lot of times we come into networks to do one of our hacking tests, and there's probably a dozen or so things that we find on almost every one of our tests that I would call low hanging fruit that would allow a bad guy to pretty much like ramp up their privileges and kind of take over the environment in a matter of minutes or hours, right? So
Yeah,
we talk slash preach about those things a lot in the podcast, right? Like, here, run this free tool and run this script and run this, to get a handle on if these things exist in your environment, and then start fixing them. And so, I mean, if nothing else, if somebody listens to the podcast forever, never throws a dollar our way, but learns about those dozen or so things that they maybe never would be aware of by some other outlet, and fixes those, I feel so good at night knowing, hey, that might have stopped them from getting hacked by like a real, bad guy, right?
right.
So there's that makes, I think, us feel great. And then the other thing too, when we can come into an environment and the client goes, hey, I've listened to the podcast, I do those dozen things that you're always yelling at us about. And then we start a test where we go, oh, wow, now we've got to up our game. And it forces us to go ping our colleagues and look at fresh, hacking tools and things that are out there. It's sort
Right.
of that iron sharpens iron a little bit,
Yeah.
right? Where
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
love going like, okay, time to roll up the sleeves. This network came to play. Like they're not messing around. And then we spend our time looking for all the things that they don't know about, right? Rather than kind of go in and go, here we go. This is very close to a lot of other reports we write, and it's the same, dozen things. So yeah.
Brian, just talk about that a little bit because you're in an industry that clearly changes rapidly, right?
Yeah.
Like there is always another um, hacking uh, opportunity out there. How do you maintain or kind of stay ahead of kind of that evolving uh, industry, and what do you do to stay on top of it personally?
Yeah. That's a great question, because I feel, and I always ask people this same question when they're on my podcast, because I feel like there's so much out there. And if you were to just look at a security news feed, yeah, about every 10 minutes, somebody's getting breached. There's some new hack. There's some
Yeah,
new theoretical thing. I think it's a combination of I think when you do this enough, and especially if you're researching, how to hack a specific thing, you end up kind of coming up with the same handful of company names and researchers. You'll sort of find their names over and over again. And so I end up
I
following all
see.
those folks on social media.
Hmm.
A lot of them then have blogs associated with the companies that they work for. So I try to subscribe to those and get email notifications so that, several times a week, I'm kind of peppered with, here's the latest and greatest, hacks that are being published and or that bad guys are using to get access to our sensitive information. and that's really nice because that's something I can use in my tests, but then also turn around to the customer and kind of tell them, right, here's a few news feeds, or here's a few publications that really, publish the cutting edge stuff, and it'll help you stay on top of things
Yeah.
as possible.
Yeah. Nice. Let me just switch gears here a little bit, but you've talked about being a business owner, um, and some of the challenges that go with that. One of the things I always find is sort of that one of the challenges business owners face is that whole work-life balance. How do you, is there anything you do to sort of maintain a healthy relationship between work and personal life?
Yeah, and I'll be super transparent and say so 7 Minute Security, the business started in 2018, and now just coming into this year, 2026, I finally feel like I'm getting the work-life balance. It's been work,
Yeah, yeah,
life up here for many years, because again, being a solopreneur, and also some of the gigs I had in the past, they would often kind of like double and triple up projects on the analysts, just because there was so much work to do, and we didn't want to tell people, hey, you're gonna have to wait 6 months for this to start, right? That was kind
yeah,
of a swear word at a lot of companies I worked for. So that was really, I guess, for lack of a better word, that was beaten into me for a lot of years. So I carried that forward, and I'm like, hey, if a customer signs a statement of work here on Monday and they want to start Friday, I'm going to try to make that happen. So
yeah,
me and my team were working way too much. And so finally, at the end of 2025, I was like, you know what? Going into 2026, I'm going to try to really lay out things on my calendar so that I do have one, maybe two tests I'm working at the same time. And then just as stuff gets signed, I'm going to just keep pushing the calendar, back a ways. And so, now stuff that comes in, I am telling people, hey, it's going to be July, it's going to be August. And I was but I was, I would say that and go, but hey, if you need things sooner, if something urgent, we'll do our best to make it happen sooner. And so far, zero people have made a fuss out of that. They've
really.
said, well, they were like, yeah, well, before we worked with you, we were used to having, a year wait, or 16 months wait to start a project. So yeah, you've kind of been spoiling us all these years. So we totally respect that you're trying to get a balance of work and life. So I kind of kick myself going, I could have done that years ago, right? But again, being in startup mentality, it's like, well, I don't want to, anything that comes in, I want to start working on it, and I want
Yeah,
to razzle dazzle them and make them happy. But I've learned a little bit too late that they still would have been happy even with just waiting a little
yeah,
while. So
yeah,
that's my big tip. It's like so obvious, but I'm like finally doing it years later. And now I'm just literally the last few weeks, I'm settling into, look at my calendar now. I've got the call with you right now, and then a very doable plate of
yeah,
projects in front of me. So
yeah, yeah. That tying that back to, earlier in our podcast, you mentioned how, like, for somebody thinking about being a business owner, I mean, when you first start, I think it is imperative that you've got the time set aside to be able to get the business going, because there's a lot of heavy lifting you have to do early on. I think you would agree that
yeah,
later on in the business life cycle, there's sort of those, like you said, it's a pretty good balance right now, but you couldn't probably do today what you 8 years ago you couldn't have done that, because you had to get the business going, and there's a lot to go
yeah.
that goes into that. So I'm glad you said that. Yeah.
There is, and you saying that made me think. I completely forgot to mention that after the last full-time gig that I had when I wanted to start this company, and like I said, they were getting acquired, so I was like, well, now's a time to step out. I did take a 6-month hacking contract job so that I could do that by day, and then work on 7 Minute the business on the
Mhm.
side, and
Yeah.
get the website and the business cards and the offerings and the social media, right? Get all that stuff going. So that was like no, I think that was November of 2017. So I've been working for I'd been working 2 months as a contractor, so November, December, and then first week of January of 2018, the group that I was contracting with called me and said, "Hey, things are going great. Thanks so much. We do have a couple of our full-time employees that just got off of a gig that ended in December. So we kind of got to give first dibs on projects to them, right?" So they said, "So we don't have any projects for you this week." And I was like, "Ooh, like a big gulp." Like,
Yeah.
okay, so no money coming in, this week. I said, "Okay, but like next week we'll probably got some stuff coming." And they're like, "Yeah." And I go, "Oh boy, this is that call where you're kind of telling me you overestimated what you thought you'd have for me, and now you don't know if you have any work for me." They're like,
Right.
"It's kind of looking that way." And I was like, "Okay, well, if things change, let me know." And they said, "Yeah, I mean, again, we'll definitely call you. We love what you've been doing. We just, they had overshot for
Yeah.
going into 2028." And so,
Yeah.
no ill will. It was just one of those hang up the phone and then turn to my wife and go, "Yeah, I'm unemployed. I guess it's time to start 7 minute security right now." So I was, like you were saying, I was getting all the stuff, the basics going and starting to meet with people. And I had to turn those efforts up to 11 and,
Yeah.
take every contact in my Rolodex out to Caribou Coffee or out to lunch, tell them what I was up to, right?
Right.
Say very loud on the podcast that I was now essentially a free agent, or I was my own business.
Yeah.
But I certainly would have loved to have a little bit more runway. I felt like I had a pretty good business plan of things I wanted to accomplish over that 6 month hacking contract. And then
Yeah.
that got cut short by about 4 months. So it was build the plane as it was flying. And that's not, I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't say like, "Oh, that was the way to do it." But it was kind of like, I do look back and go, it was a blessing because I did have to go in the mode of this sort of has to succeed. I mean, I
Yeah.
could go on LinkedIn and try to find another job, but like if I'm going to give this a go, there's literally no time like the present because I have no other options.
Right. But again, going back again to an earlier conversation we had on this podcast, that can create a lot of anxiety in people, right? Not
Oh yeah,
knowing
yeah.
where that next paycheck is going to come from, right? And if
Oh
that's
yeah.
really upsetting to somebody or a family member, right? Sometimes it's a spouse that's saying, "Hey, I don't feel good about this." It goes
Yeah.
back to that decision about becoming a business owner. That's the sort of things you have to be able to live with and overcome if you're going to be successful at starting a business.
Yeah, certainly. And I'm glad you brought up like your significant other having support. I mean, I would not have even tiptoed into this. I don't think, I mean, without my wife's support, she's always
Yeah.
been behind me 100%. And before starting my own thing, I would call myself a little bit of a serial job hopper because I'd get into something and I'd feel pretty good about that skill set and then just be like, well, I could do this forever, or I could go to this other position where I learn these new technologies, right? And I've been doing that for a while, not realizing at all that I think that kind of not irritability, but my constant sense of feeling unsettled was really that the kind of the answer was to start my own thing,
Yeah.
but my wife was there through all the job hops. And when I was like, I think I had that meeting with my mentor and told her about it. And she's like, "Yeah, I mean, let's go for it." And, once it was all of a sudden there was no parachute and I was just flying by the seat of my pants, there was some weeks there where we were still, getting the shingles on. And we had that conversation about, let's give this a little bit more time, but maybe not too much time, right? It wasn't an infinite amount of rope.
Right.
Um, but she was just like, "Yeah, I can tell you feel like you have to give this a shot." And it was probably like I was turning 40. Maybe there was a little bit of like a light flavor of midlife crisis or something where I
Sure.
just part of me was like, I want to show my sons that, like, yeah, their risk adverse dad went for something. He tried something that was outside of his wheelhouse. There was part of that too. But
Yeah.
but again, I think if she would have been like, this would be devastating for the family, don't do it. I think I would just be kind of safely back where I was working before.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. Uh, Well, Brian, as we kind of wrap up here, just think for a minute about your experience as a business owner, and if you had somebody in front of you saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting my own business or buying a business," what kind of advice would you have for them?
I kind of like we've talked about, I would want to give them the good, bad, and ugly of my experience, just real transparent, not to wow them and dazzle them with the, you're your own boss and you could make unlimited money, some of the nice things, right, that are theoretical, but they're possible. Nor would I want to be like, I think I lost 5 years of my life during that first first year of business because it's so stressful. But the ones, the folks that I've talked to, and most of the ones I'm talking to are wanting to start an IT or security business.
Sure.
What I recommend highly to them is to go the route of getting in front of as many people as you can and giving away some of your expertise and your information. When I first was getting the company going, I had the podcast going, but I also I spent a lot of money with a local radio station. They recorded some 7-minute security radio commercials that were going to get played during rush hour drive time, or the 4 to 5 p.m. hour as well, um, playing on all these like business radio stations, key decision makers, right?
Yeah.
And I spent more than I care to admit on that because they really were like, this is going to get you all sorts of business. And there was a special website that could track engagement and clicks and all that kind of stuff. And it got 0 visits. Like, yeah, you know what I mean? Not even clicks into our little clickbaity links. Like the site itself, nobody even punched in the URL except me testing it every once in a while to make sure it worked. Not to say that a different targeted thing wouldn't work. But I did that on one side. I spent some money on having somebody do cold calling, cold emailing. I spent a nice fat chunk of change on that at the same time. That got, I think, one email reply, and it was a deal that just was not at all the right fit for us.
Mhm.
So that was kind of like one bucket of thing that I tried, and then the other one was, continuing with the podcast and also going out to when I worked through my Rolodex and contacted people I'd worked with in the past. I offered to just come in for free and for during their company meeting or during a lunch and learn, train people, do like a 40-minute presentation on how to be a more secure person. So it was coming in and talking to people about, here's how you pick a better password. Here's how you don't fall for social engineering. Here's how it was in fact, we still do it. It's called 7 Ways to Not Get Hacked. And it's just supposed to be bite-sized, practical things you can do to, like the title says, not get hacked. And that plus the podcast just, brought in opportunities immediately. So I guess that's all to say, kind of bringing it full circle. That's why I'm a huge believer in, no, you keep giving your expertise away, get into get into opportunities where you can get in front of people and share your expertise, even if they don't pay you much or they just feed you. I feel like anything you give away, even if it's for free, it will then come back and it'll repay you in paid projects.
Yeah.
I'm just a really
Yeah.
firm believer in that at this point.
I love that, Brian. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it. And I think you shared some really fascinating information about not just entrepreneurship, but specifically around IT. And I think folks are going to find it really valuable.
Well, thanks so much. I hope so, and I appreciate the opportunity, Greg.
Thank you, Brian. We will we will see folks again at a future Biz Talk Weekly. Again, I'm your host, Greg Johnson, and thanks for watching.